Everybody, welcome. Clinton Bonner here of the Upriser podcast. I am joined today by Gary Bolles, the chair of Future of Work at Singularity University. And we're going to dive into a bunch of different topics, but I really want to set the stage for this discussion with Gary. We were just on, so the CEO of Topcoder, Mike Morris, Gina Hadley, the CEO and co-founder of The Second Shift, and Gary, who you're all going to get to meet in a second. We're just on a great discussion hosted by Techonomy, which was a roundtable focused around the very, I would say, maybe philosophical a couple of weeks ago, a couple of months ago, and now very real conversation of will a new work model emerge in a post-COVID environment. And I got to listen to Gary quite a bit. He was certainly one of the stars of that conversation. And Gary, during that conversation, you brought up this premise of building a new talent table and what that means for CHROs and how they really need to act in this post-COVID environment. We're going to bring the listeners down that kind of down that rabbit hole in a bit. It really, really piqued me. I thought it was a fascinating topic and the way you framed it. Looking forward to getting into it. But first and foremost, Gary, how you doing? Obviously, we're at April 23rd, I think, at the time of this recording. We're still in the middle of the pandemic in the States. How's everything on your side of the country? I know you're out in San Francisco.
Yeah, nothing much new. Just a pandemic. Thanks for asking. It's a fascinating time. If there was any topic you would have wished, you started focusing on, 9 years ago, it might have been the future of work, because suddenly we all have questions about just, is the future here? How much of that future is here? What's happening to work? What's happening to our organizations? What are some of the things that we should be thinking about in terms of the near-term adaptation and then the long-term strategic? I appreciate you asking me. There's always things, I think, in each of our families that we're a little nervous about. I've got a 93-year-old mother
Great.
a rest home here in San Francisco, but is doing great.
Great.
And
awesome.
and they're one of the ones that is managing the times quite well. So, but overall, to me, this is really an opportunity for. I think first we all have this shock period.
Sure.
That we adapted to. I think for the piece I wrote on Techonomy, I called it the Great Reset.
Yep.
And then I talked about 3 different phases. So the falling off the cliff phase, we're still a little bit in that, but now people are starting to pick their heads up. Once we start to figure out how we're going to turn the lights on, it's not all suddenly going to be Klieg lights. It's going to be, little rheostats, little flickers here and there. And so we're going to have this sort of W-shaped, riffling. And then there'll be a third period of where we're really going to emerge. And that's an opportunity for reinvention. And so I'm right now, most of the focus that I've got is helping people who want to think through that near-term tactical set of issues. But now I'm hoping that more people will really want to think through those longer strategic issues.
Yeah, I think so too. And I do look at it as a huge opportunity. And I, for one, am not on the hyperbolic side of, things will never get back to quote unquote normal. Like we won't be in a bar together at some point, and we won't be able to raise a glass at some point and go back to those normal things. However, the way I look at it is, hey, large events like this happen throughout, the history, humanity's history. And it's not so much that things don't go back to a normal. It's just that things change. There are major events, and then there's kind of a new path that we go down together, and there is some major change along that way, and then something new becomes normal, and we get acclimated to it, and there's always that kind of opportunity to come out of it. One thing I wanted to ask you too out of the gate is, being the chair at Singularity University, I end up talking with people and showing people lots of articles from SU. I've had the privilege of being out there numerous times, starting in 2013. And most recently we were out there, just about 2 months ago now. We were down by your campus when I was out at a Wipro event. So I've known about SU and kind of been privileged to be part of it for a number of years, but I still feel like a lot of folks who don't know about SU, there's sometimes a bit of a misunderstanding of the purpose of Singularity University. And then you, as the chair of Future of Work, what's your day to day and your kind of quarter to quarter like? What's your purpose there, and who are you speaking to most often?
So Singularity University, which I'm sure your listeners have Googled by now, but just in case, is really a learning platform and a think tank based in Santa Clara, California. But it's a global membership and audience, and so there's hundreds of thousands of people have been through the organization's programs. There's a really large adjunct faculty. There's very few staff, so I'm actually adjunct. I'm not on the payroll of the organization. What I do is I'm focused on a lot of the issues related to future of work, future of learning, future of the organization, and then with SU, that's a constant process of I get to leverage the insights from a whole bunch of their other Brainiac faculty that are smart on everything from artificial intelligence software to next generation medicine. And so what SU sees its purpose as is helping people to navigate a world of exponential change, often fueled by exponential technologies, and to try to do that in a way that benefits humanity. And so that's a big mandate, but the organization has a big footprint and a great brand and tremendous influence in terms of helping people to really think about the ways that technology can be most beneficial. And I'll talk about, as we talk about future of work, I'll talk about a number of examples. But the reason that so many of these different influences and technologies sort of coalesce in the context of how we work, how we learn, how we organize ourselves in companies is because we had a whole bunch of these sort of older constructs, which I'll be talking about, but then now we've got these new opportunities. We got the opportunity to reinvent a whole bunch of things. And before the virus, we were talking about those as exponential change, but it was not evenly distributed. So William Gibson's favorite line, future's already here, it's just not evenly distributed. When I lecture, I would start off with just these amazing technologies, telling a story of 25 years in the future. And then I would say, well, no, actually, every single one of the technologies that I've mentioned is in development or exists today. And so that's what happens is, you don't hear about self-driving cars for years, and then suddenly they seem to be everywhere. Well, no, with exponential change, they were sort of developing under the radar, and then suddenly they break out and the technology is ubiquitous. And so that's really what the goal of SU has been, is how do we help people to understand those technologies that are impacting our industries, our organizations, and our lives? And then with my work with the future of work, how do we shape all that into how humans will be involved in that exponential future?
Yeah, no, it's compelling stuff. And for anybody out there, you guys put out a ton of content as well. So the SU blog is something that I frequent quite a bit. And I would say to any leaders out there that are really focused on understanding that next 5 to 10 year landscape and how you can get your enterprise really future-proof ready and understand the major concepts and get around them and then start to use them so you can derive new value and create new value. I think SU does a great job of putting on a ton of different ways in which those enterprise leaders can engage with SU, get that education, and also get the networking, right? Go there and understand those networks and learn from peer to peer and some of the best and brightest in these different disciplines and emerging industries. So certainly want to encourage anybody listening that has that kind of mindset and that leadership goals to check out what SU can offer them. So then pivoting, Gary, into, we had this great techonomy discussion. And again, it was focused on the new models of, hey, will new work models emerge? And if so, how rapidly? And all this with the techonomy discussion that we had, I think it was just last week at this point. Really vivid discussion. And we'll post a link to the techonomy website so people can go check that out as well. And you hit up on a specific notion, I'll repeat it again, where you were saying, hey, this is my capture of it at least, and tell me how much I got right. You're like, hey, back in the 90s and 2000s, CIOs were, for all intents and purposes, begging for a seat, at the table, saying, hey, let me in. I should be here and helping to guide the future of our organization. And your point was now it's the time for CHROs, so Chief Human Resource Officers, sometimes as Chief People Officers as well. And you could tell us if you see a variance in their roles. But now your statement was, hey, now you see CHROs repeating kind of exactly what CIOs were doing 20 years ago, 15 years ago, a decade ago. And you're saying, hey, you know what? There's actually a different way that you should be doing this. And you kind of coined it building a new talent table and inviting people to kind of come to their party. I thought it was fascinating. But I'd like to learn more. I'd like to hear you kind of flesh that out a bit, because it was, a piece of the discussion. And I thought, honestly, it could be an entire discussion. So I'd love to hand it over and say, did I frame that up the right way? What would you add? And how would you frame it for the people if they're hearing about this for the first time?
No, absolutely. No, I think you've definitely hit the right framing. So just to date myself, back in the early 90s, I was the editorial director for a magazine by the name of Network Computing. So I think of myself as a recovering journalist, actually was editorial director for a half a dozen different publications. But in the early 90s, those of you who are students of history will probably remember that there were these things called multi-protocol networks. So, and there was a lot, every enterprise had mainframes, mini computers, PCs. It was this mix of different ways to connect them in local area and wide area networks. And the average CIO, the role of CTO was not all that well developed in the early 90s. The average CIO had to manage all that. And so you had complexity, you had a massive complexity. And oh, by the way, there was no thought whatsoever you were going to connect it to a public network. As a matter of fact, I would sit down with the CIOs of financial services firms on Wall Street, and they would point their finger at me and say, I will never connect this network to a public network. And oh, by the way, they also were absolutely against outsourcing. Sure, you would outsource to, at the time, EDS and some of the other big companies, IBM, some part of your infrastructure. But whatever you thought of as core to the business, if you were processing the business's core transactions on that, that was going to be in-house. And so you would see maybe 5 to 15% of the computing activity outsourced, and then the rest of it was all jealously held by the CIO. And what I said at the time was, look, you've got all this stuff that is just forcing you to focus on this minutia of just keeping the lights on. And of course, at the time, it was all this talk about 99.9 uptime and all that sort of. And so because of that pressure, how are you ever going to have a strategic conversation? The CEO is going to pull you in, and what the CEO is going to say is, yeah, I tried to dial in by a 2400 baud modem last night and it didn't work. That's what the CEO is going to tell you. It's not going to be, tell me how technology can actually enable our organization to meet its needs for its customers better. So fast forward to today, we have cloud computing. Massive percentages of the computing power of the organization are external. You trust that that's being managed well. You're connected to public networks because that's the only way you're going to get access to that cloud infrastructure. And you've got this constantly moving landscape of your technology, but even though there's still complexity, you still have, BYOD, bring your own device, kinds of policies and that sort of thing. You actually have mostly single protocols. You've got, basically the same kind of computers in a lot of different places. And it's complicated, but it's much more manageable. And so what that allows you to do is to say, I can give more mental bandwidth to the strategy of the organization. And by now we've got so many examples of how we've proven every company's a technology company, right? Everybody's got to be able to leverage technology for business value. So now let's talk about that CHRO. So what you have is you've got all of this blocking and tackling stuff. You've got benefits information, you're processing payroll. And so again, what is the CEO going to come and off and tell you is, yes, I just heard from a whole bunch of people they didn't get their paychecks last week. Or here now we're suddenly they're all working from home and people couldn't dial in. Well, is that your problem or is that IT's problem? Or you guys fix it? And so when you've got so many of these activities that are so deeply based on what I think of as sort of the lower tiers of value, that is, it's repetitive, it's stuff it's all the things that we tell people they should be automating and we're not. We still throw people at a lot of those problems. Then it's very, very challenging when in addition now we are literally reinventing the way that we're going to channel human energy. So I'll just give you the framing, and then we can, go in any direction you want to take it. But basically, my premise is that we created jobs. We created modern jobs. We created modern organizations off of an industrial era model. And I'm happy to explore any of the history if you want, but basically, organizational hierarchies go all the way back to Alexander the Great. The processes by which we break down problems to solve them and then put people on different parts of the problem comes from when we automated factories. We have all of these, the role of the manager was actually developed. That's structured what I call management by observation, or even worse, by continued the need to be able to have somebody in person, management by surveillance.
Yep, surveillance.
That model came from a factory where you had quality that you were trying to get done, and you had to have people doing things at different steps, and you couldn't throw machines at all the problems. And so all of these processes, we don't question. We don't question that it's the role of the manager to make sure that they can see each person in front of them and that they get their work done. We don't question that jobs are structured into these very narrow corridors for solving problems. So I say, listen, we are at the point, we're going to be at the point anyway where we're reinventing this. At the end of the day, work is just three things. It's a problem to be solved. It's tasks we perform to solve those problems. And it's our human skills. And there's lots of other things wrapping around that, a job, but it's just a problem to be solved and our human skills. And it just so happens we have these tasks that we lump together into what we call processes. And then we fall in love with the processes and we forget the problem we were trying to solve. And so if you step back and we say, well, wait a minute, an organization has a customer or client or some constituents, whether it's a government agency or it's a big software company. It's trying to meet the needs of those constituents. Then it's built all of these processes to be able to deliver that value to that customer or that client or that constituent. If we just blow all that up and we say instead, what are the problems to be solved? What are the human skills that need to be applied to solving those problems? And how do we continually adapt the processes, what my friend John Hagel calls practices, so that they're meeting the needs to solve the problem, then we've completely changed the landscape. Then that people department becomes literally about people. So the new table that the CHRO needs to create is the table at which we define how we channel human energy. Mechanically, work is just human skills applied to tasks to solve problems. Spiritually, work and organizations are about channeling human energy to create value. And so and I'm happy to talk about all the different kinds of work roles and the ways, but basically that old structure of the organization, I call it a box.
Yep.
My friend Peter Diamandis, co-founder of Singularity, he talks about abundance a lot. Yep. Well, we have abundance with human skills. It's called a workforce. There's abundance outside the box and there's scarcity inside the box. You only have a few jobs that you can provide to humans. And so HR in the past, that blocking and tackling was just about managing scarcity. You're only going to let a few humans in from that abundant outside into the organization, and then it's binary. They're either an employee or they're not. Well, now we have temporary workers, gig platforms, dozens and dozens of different work. Even your customers with crowdsourcing can be solving problems for you, right? And so with that pastiche of completely different work roles, you have to run the organization as what I call the network with a capital N and a capital W. Network is all about helping a group of humans to dynamically bind around a problem, solve it, and move on to the next one. And that's true whether it's processing expense reports or whether it's creating your next billion-dollar product.
Love the visualization that I get with this idea of like setting a new table and then in bringing people over to a new set of rules, essentially, as opposed to kind of playing by the old game, which you laid out is actually quite old and older than most people probably think in terms of human history. The first thing that comes up for me that I took notes on here was, in the 90s, you had people wagging their fingers in your face saying, I will never go on I will never be outside here. And of course that was kind of the birth of cloud was just starting to come online. And now, of course, for the most part, most of it's on cloud, or at least some hybrid cloud. And it's all out there. And we have the birth of platforms. There are
Right.
many, even HR. There are many platforms out there that supposedly should be handling a lot of this minutia, this day-to-day minutia. So it took the CIOs maybe a 20-year journey, possibly maybe
Yeah.
25-year journey
Easily. Yeah.
to go from I will never do it that way. And by saying so, I'm going to kind of bound myself to kind of being enslaved in the day-to-day, moment-to-moment things where you're just a cost center and people
Yeah.
just want things to work, and then escaping that and then leading the organizations from a digital kind of focus first, which of course created all sorts of amazing trillions of dollars of value once we started doing that as a society. But that was 25 years ago or so, where cloud and platforms, they were either brand new and in some ways, carried with it some heresy. It was like, no, I will not do it that way. A lot of
Right.
resilience. It's in my opinion certainly not like that now. It's 2020. It's very cloud dominant, very platform dominant. So are the question is, are the CHROs simply on a faster track? Do they have an ability to move a heck of a lot faster and not wait 25 years or 20 years or 15 years versus where the CIOs were when they were, wagging their fingers in your face in the 90s?
So first off, I mean, I think a lot of people and HR leaders already get the memo. Like they understand what some of the goals are. Where I feel that there is an opportunity to accelerate the process better is first off by a different mindset, right? So I talk a lot about mindset and skill set, and so the mindset that there's, we can do this by incremental innovation, that we can keep on bringing in more apps to be able to automate different parts of the process. And that sort of incremental process is perfectly understandable because HR normally is the poor stepchild when it comes to budget, except when you absolutely must have this one skill set that you're not able to hire for, and the business will crater if you don't have it. Otherwise, HR is always resource constrained. It's seen as administrative. It's not seen as strategic. And so what I'd say is there's opportunity to be able to leapfrog that, right? And so how did CIOs leapfrog that?
Yeah.
What they eventually came to was that they understood the business goals that the C-suite was trying to achieve, and then they said, all right, here's all the places technology can enable that, and we'll basically see that as a forced march through each of the different parts of the business to enable them to be more technology enabled. And but the basic premise is we know it's going to deliver that business value. So what's the opportunity with people? Well, if you buy my premise that it's human skills applied to solve problems, or you can you want to take it, keep going further, you can say it's develop solutions, and you want to see even further, it's it's so that there's a result, right?
Yep.
So happy customers, faster products, better products, you name it. So if you buy that premise, then first off, as part of the mindset for a CHRO or any HR leader, or even leaders within organizations that aren't in people or HR, is what are the problems to be solved? If you develop problem-centric thinking, which is that you're able to help even down to the atomic team level, help them to be able to continually better define the problems that they're trying to solve, empower them to be able to find the right skill set, if it's not in the team, to be able to pull in other resources to solve that, and then to continually have the processes that support bringing in that talent as efficiently as possible, making sure it's the right set of skills, having a set of processes that are not this sort of binary, leaden hiring series of steps that we bring from the past, but instead thinking about what are the ways we can most enable human skills to be applied to this problem in the fastest and most effective way possible. And then what are the different contexts in which we can both meet the needs of the organization and the needs of those human beings. The problem with a lot of the more traditional gig platforms, not so much related to coding or the longer term training skill sets. But a lot of the app driven ones, like the Ubers of the world, those are optimized to help the hirer, but they don't always result in the best for the worker, for the messy, expensive human. And so it's really important that leaders within organizations see this as an opportunity to build that kind of win-win environment. And unfortunately, though, we've bundled so many things into that traditional job. Why did we do that? Well, because of risk management. It costs so much to bring in that worker. It costs so much to bring in that person, and to make sure to vet them, to make sure you feel like they are a great mix, a great fit for the kind of problems they're going to be solving, the people are going to be working with. But now we have so many other ways to do that and to speed that process and to get the human talent just in time and just in context for what needs to be solved. And so that's a new table. That's a completely new. How will your organization channel human energy today and tomorrow? That's the new table.
Very cool. No, that's it. I think the additional detail around there is really key. And you started that part by saying, hey, a lot of the CHROs, a lot of the best companies out there, they've already got the memo. So I think it'd be interesting just to explore a little bit from your point of view. Do you have a couple in mind that you could point to and say, like, they're doing this well? And whether it's specific well or more generic along what you were just describing, but they have a forward-looking, outside-in philosophy, so that they could get those problems solved without. To me, I look at it. I hear what you're saying, and I look at it very simply as, how could we do that problem solving simpler and remove minutia so that we can be more, whatever it is, more effective, faster to market, better for our customers, more consistent. And then of course, through all that, give a better employee experience as well. Because if you're tying into outside brains that help an FTE do a job and they're more productive and more engaged with, then, I think you got the golden goose mix of what HR is actually after. But are there a couple of examples out there that you could point to? You're like, they're doing a pretty darn good job of it and they're leading.
So first off, whenever I give examples of organizations, I'm always sensitive that, going back to, some people might remember In Search of Excellence, there are always attempts at each period to say, here are the poster children. Yeah. And then 5 years later, the company's either gone or acquired or, or not as successful. Right. And so I'm talking about now, and I'm talking about, because nothing's perfect. Yep. We're messy, expensive humans. We're not perfect. So none of our systems are going to be perfect. We're entropy machines, right? So when we talk about, instead, is the characteristics and the intentions of organizations, and then their processes to be able to achieve those intentions, and the ways that right now it seems to be connoting business value. So and I'll talk about a couple big and a couple small, right? Sure. So
that sounds great.
Yeah. So small, one of the elements that is critical that we really haven't talked about is alignment. Is what you find is you get to become a more distributed organization, a more nimble organization, a larger organization, is once you get beyond 2 people, and even at the level of 2 people, alignment is critical, because we have to agree what we're trying to achieve. And one of the reasons that we have this formula for startups that is all about building these iteration machines, these trial and error machines to solve problems, is that it continually gives information back to the team about what is important. Like, what does a customer want? But as a team scales, as organizations scale, we get out of alignment. And then we build these leaden processes like, the annual retreat by the C-suite to come up with the plan for this year, or the next 10-year plan, and then announce it, like tablets coming down from a mountain. and then we have these 360-degree reviews, and we, once a year. And that's how we make sure, whether you're doing the job that the company needs or not. So all of these are just, completely, they're what I call the old rules of work. These are all practices should go the way of the dodo. Instead, what we need to be thinking about how we align on a regular basis. What are the overall goals of the organization? What are your goals? How do your goals map to those goals? And how do all these goals keep on changing, right? So the poster child is Asana, which is actually about alignment. They build software and so they were actually crafted from the beginning. Dustin Moskovitz, the co-founder, former Facebook co-founder, spent 2 years planning the culture of the organization before he hired a single person. Because what they do is they do these sprints, which are typically quarterly, And then they have a series of reviews every quarter to be able to help bring back into alignment. What did we say last quarter we wanted to achieve? What are we achieving this quarter? It's not just the standard review of the financials. It's it's all about strategy, linking all the way to implementation and execution. And so what that means is you're only going to be out of sync for the maximum of 3 months until the next time you get in sync. And what that does then is it changes the entire way you think about how you hire people, because now you're talking about being able to clearly give people an idea of the problems that they need to solve and how those problems connect to the overall problems of the organization and its customers. Because without that, you're operating in the dark. You're acting as if you know what the goals are, but you don't. At a bigger company, I'd love to point to companies like Nextera. DTE Energy is Florida Power and Light. Not DTE. So Florida Power and Light, Xterra has a set of processes that are all around trying to ensure that they're continually matching up the human with the problems that need to be solved, the work that needs to be done. And because they've been at it for a long time, what they've done is they've sort of figured out how you deliver, this reliable thing called power, to the point where they're actually became an expert on renewable energy, and they now operate renewable energy facilities for other utilities all around the U.S. And so that's an example where you've got people that absolutely know the kinds of problems they need to solve. They're aligned with those problems, and then it becomes such a core competency. You're able to go provide it to people that you would have thought as competitors. I mean, utilities don't compete across state lines all that much, but you're providing to others like you, and that to me is a tremendous result.
Yeah, that's a great example, and something for me on the FLP front. So I live in the Northeast. I'm in Connecticut, and we have a energy company up here, and we'll keep them out of it in terms of their name. And there's only two, so you could flip a coin. Flip a coin. You'll be right eventually. But I'm also an FLP customer because I have an investment property that right now, going back to two-sided marketplaces, it's mainly on Airbnb, and right now it's vacant, but it's on Siesta Key, and we've had it for a number of years, and it's lovely. And I love taking advantage of the two-sided marketplace of Airbnb and the ability that I was able to go secure that and pretty much mitigate risk with this two-sided marketplace that was now available to us, and I've taken great advantage of that. The other day, I'd say about maybe 6 or 7 days ago, I get a newsletter from FLP, who is my energy provider down there, and says, hey, during this COVID crisis, energy prices have collapsed. We're giving you back 25% discount on your bill. Like, very well done, and also just right to the point, messaging, clear, lovely, like tell me exactly why this is happening. And of course, wishing well and saying, stay safe. We know you're going through some times, as we all are. Now, juxtapose that versus the newsletters that I haven't gotten from my Northeast utility, and it's night and day difference, And so for me, that's you gave an example. We didn't talk about this before. That was a question I lobbed over to you without you knowing, and a very real human centric response by them to recognize that and deliver something back to me of value, where I could at least just say, okay, as a brand, I believe they have my best interests in mind, and that was really powerful for me. So I'd love to give.
We're not going to get that. We're not going to get that from PG&E here either.
I think they have some other challenges.
Distractions.
That are in the news quite a bit too. So I think a nice kind of third part to evolve the conversation into, and then kind of wrap on this part, would be you also talked about in the Techonomy Roundtable about kind of avoiding the race to the bottom, right? And you hinted at it before when you were talking about two-sided marketplaces, maybe like transportation, where it's really, really great for one side, but it doesn't have the other side, in that case, the talent or the labor's interest, best interest at heart. And it might not be able to sustain itself over a long period of time. So how does a new CHRO who is looking at outside in and looking to be, I would call it fluid, or have like burstable capacity so that they can problem solve faster, how do they get a hybrid right when it's like, we have FTEs, we want outside in talent so we could problem solve faster, and we want to do this in a way that is not causing an economic race to the bottom for the talent coming from the outside in? what are kind of tips or things you would encourage those leaders to look at before they just go, oh, we'll bring all this talent in without thinking about what could that possibly be doing long term?
So, no, it's a great question, because I think that is one of the major deliverables. Is if we're going to buy in this premise that there's a bunch of problems that are knowable to be solved, and that we're continually trying to just optimize this connection between humans. And by the way, there's a lot of problems we haven't even defined, and that's one of the problems to be solved, right? So in many cases, you're going to bring in, a team that is going to do some type of agile process to make sure they even understand, the problem in the first place. But managing that network of talent is going to be one of the major deliverables for the CHRO of the future, is because you're going to have this, when you're talking about essentially, I call it a portfolio of talent, in that you've got a range from this, FTE to, somebody you've never met that, might be, a coder or app designer, on some platform that you've not even connected with yet. And so if you think about the core competencies of that: problem definition, the ability to dynamically bind around problems, having managers and team leads that themselves are able to deal with the ambiguity of multiple projects, multiple kinds of talent. You've got to have technology to support this. So right now we have really, really challenges in helping humans to understand their own skills and to know the kinds of problems that they could solve, and then the dynamic connection between them. And so what ends up happening with platforms is the signals from the market, the job openings or the project descriptions, are critical, because they're sending all the signals to the talent. But if the talent doesn't really know the kinds of problems that it can solve because it hasn't had the experience yet, or has been working in another field or so on, then they don't match up. Like, you don't see that somebody has these transferable skills that could be usable here.
Yep.
And so that's a problem to be solved. And there actually are a tremendous number of innovators that are all focusing on what we think of as a more skills-centric model. But that's a big part of this process. Is in the past, when it was a box, the net you would cast as a CHRO was for a very limited number of roles that you thought of as the critical ones. And for the rest of them, you could literally just post something on Indeed.com and you would get a lot of the flow. We're going to enter, we're going through this sort of riffling period now with the Great Reset, where we're going to have, well, right now we've got 27 million people unemployed in the United States. Mm-hmm. It's going to be the biggest game of employment musical chairs in the history of humans when we start to turn the lights back on, but the lights are going to flicker. They're going to go off again, and they're going, so we're going to have a period where figuring out exactly what talent is needed and how to apply them. And so what ends up happening is, unfortunately, in these periods in the past, is that the demand side, the hirer, is able to require that somebody that in the past job only required a high school degree. Now you're requiring a college degree. Why are you doing that? Oh, well, I'm doing that because I can. If I can get somebody with a college degree that is just as cheap as the high school, why wouldn't I? Well, it sounds like a rational response, but the challenge really is, how are you going to have the diverse workforce that you need? Yeah. And so I strongly encourage leaders, team leads, and when you define the need for a role, focus on the problems to be solved and the skill set, and leave behind a whole bunch of the experience metrics, because you're probably wrong. As a matter of fact, I'm going to guarantee you're wrong. You're trying to reduce risk. What you need continually to do is to build the most diverse portfolio of talent you can to be able to solve the problems of tomorrow. Having them all have the same profile is a guarantee for failure. And so this is the opportunity, is to be able to, leveraging the two-sided work markets, is to try to send the market signals that you are more open to that alternative worker, and that it's on your shoulders to have the process to be able to work with them, to be able to get them involved in projects to test out, is this the right fit for it? Oh, great, it is the right fit. Now here's even more. So that's really where I think our opportunity is. And if you fast forward in 10 years, that's going to be a core competency for every organization.
And it seems to me like it's double-edged in the sense that it's going to be an inflection point for so many organizations, where some can go back and do what you said previously, which is, well, now I could get this master's person, this PhD who got furloughed, and go look for the the smartest of the smartest of the smartest in the room,
Yeah.
and kind of cling to that because that's, again, traditional, and that's what they've, many times have always done. And others will look at this and say, wait a second, we actually have a cleaner slate than just an influx of available talent. We actually have a chance where we could reform how we move, how people can move in and out of work for our organization. And from a goal perspective, isn't that where we want to go? Do we want to be more fluid as opposed to just going to find the next PhD or that master's because they're available all of a sudden? But that's going to be a tempting carrot, so that's going to be very interesting to watch, to see who goes where and who has the kind of 10-year vision and not just the, let's say, 6 months to 18-month horizon of, I could go hoard a lot of these great master's people that are suddenly out of work. So that'd be very interesting. From the Topcoder side, we look at this as what you just framed up. We kind of frame it as, in a post-COVID world, how do we help organizations build resiliency? So that's kind of how we look at it always anyway. Before COVID, we have offerings and products that are more really focused on workforce transformation to say, okay, you have your full-time employees. We're not here to take them away. We are here to literally put them in a bowl with gig and people that have specialized skill sets and put it on a platform so that work can stream and work can be fluid, and you can burst up and down with skills without going through all that minutia that you were describing earlier, which is really right now most of the CHRO's days is that minutia of hiring and firing and ramping and all those HR issues. So what we're seeing is a nice, the opportunity is, and I would say the optimistic viewpoint, Gary, is that we're getting calls from leaders saying, help me get to that 10-year vision, but a lot faster. Help me we have furloughed people, we have contractors, and we have FTEs that are going nowhere, but all of a sudden it's shattered. How do we kind of put it back together and get it in a new way that we could just pump work to it with more fluidity? And we're getting those calls. So I'd say just because we're on the ground level of those discussions, I would say, optimistically, there's a lot of companies already seeing the light and going forward with it. So it's going to be very interesting to see, I think, the next 6 months to 12 months, kind of choose your own adventure. Will you kind of go back to what you've always done, or will you look at this as a true clean slate to build a new resilient organization for the future? And I think that's a really cool thing we'll have to check back in on. Gary, any parting words of wisdom for the folks watching?
No, I think the one thing I'd want to leave listeners with is just the perspective that there's always a question: is this a unique time? and the answer is, it is. It's always a unique time. Sure, there are lessons from the past, but this is a very unique time. What we've talked about for a long time is that the future of work is going to be continually enabled by technology. And there was eventually going to be this pretty big reset that was going to happen around, generalized AI or, some breakthrough technologies. Well, we're already, with the unemployment level that we have here in the US right now, we're more than halfway towards some of the worst case scenarios for unemployment from technology. So it turns out it wasn't a robot, it's a virus. What's really important is that we're having this dual mindset. What are the needs of the organization to be able to channel those talents? But then we also have to make sure that we have the right kind of approach to the way that we are sourcing and using that talent. And if we do that right, then we're going to be employing a broader group of people. We're going to be channeling them all to the right problems. Our communities are going to thrive. And if we do it wrong, we're going to keep on hiring in a much more narrow lens. And what'll end up happening is you're going to accelerate some of the challenges that we were most worried about. So that's really our opportunity now. This is the training wheels for some of the future changes, because today it's a virus, tomorrow it will be generalized AI. We're going to have these shocks to the system are going to happen again. As you're saying, let's build more resilient organizations and let's build more inclusive organizations.
Great. I think it's a great way to leave it. And, good mantra for those out there that are leading organizations. I think it's, something we could all rally around. And, it's to me, it just seems like, hey, if we pick the right path forward, it's, to me, and it seems, to you, just clearly, it's a brighter path forward. There's so much opportunity there. If if we can make, maybe make some hard choices now and really think through the next 10 years for organizations and how work moves. So really
Yeah.
great discussion, Gary. Certainly love that you took an hour with us to join us. So thanks so much. Stay safe out in San Francisco. Say hi to the team at SU, and we'll catch up soon.
All right. Thanks a lot. Stay safe. Be well.
Thank you.